And I just don't want you to feel, shame or guilt for choosing one over the other. There's no right answer. Welcome to the Vibrantly You podcast. We're your hosts, Megan Martineau
and Caitlin Cipriano. In this podcast, we talk about fitness and nutrition on your motherhood journey. Whether you are trying to conceive, pregnant, postpartum, or beyond, you are welcome here.
Nothing is off limits, and our goal is to support you in this important season of life so that you can feel vibrantly you. As a reminder, this information is not medical advice. Please see the show notes for more details.
Welcome back to the Vibrantly You podcast. Today we are wrapping up our birth story series with Meg, talking about her birth story with her second child, which was a TOLAC. That's a trial of labor after cesarean with a successful VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. Those two things are important as we continue to chat so we can abbreviate. And as a trigger warning, before we dive into this episode, we will be talking about postpartum hemorrhage, which does involve talking about blood and heavy bleeding. Okay, Meg, let's start off with your decision to do a trial of labor and VBAC over having a repeat C-section. Can you tell us kind of what went into your decision-making process? Because I see this question like a lot.
Yes. So I pretty much knew that I wanted to have a VBAC literally right after the birth of my son, because that was one of the first things I asked. I don't think I talked about this in my last birth story episode, but that was one of the first things I had asked my OB at my 6-week postpartum follow-up after my C-section was, will I be eligible for a VBAC in the future? Because I had a planned C-section. And she had said, yes. When you have a planned C-section, you have not gone into labor, there have not been labor complications, you are an excellent candidate for a VBAC in the future. The recommendation is that you wait 18 months between births. So this is between births, not between pregnancies. So that was something I knew early on. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to plan for that 18 months between births.
Short.
I know. So that I can, increase my chances of having a VBAC. So once I was pregnant and I had my first doctor's appointment, I actually switched providers from my previous provider, not because I didn't like them. I loved my OB that I had, who did my C-section, but she was on maternity leave. So since I couldn't have her, I was like, I don't really like any of the other doctors here, so we're going to switch. I wanted to make sure I picked a provider that had performed a lot of VBAC births. Just someone, who was really comfortable with it and supportive of it. I also was okay with the possibility of a repeat C-section. So I knew that there was a real possibility of that happening. Just that's the nature of it, But I wanted to do everything that I could to prepare myself for a VBAC. So that did include finding the provider and also making sure that the provider, the hospital, was equipped to handle complications that can arise from a TOLAC. So the biggest one being a uterine rupture, because there are some providers who do not allow people to try for a VBAC just because they don't have the resources if something happens, if complications happen. So I wanted to make sure that, the place that I was seeing not only was like, yeah, we love this for you, we support this, but that they also could handle any complications that came up. And then I did also hire a doula for the emotional support, but also to just help me navigate all of the research, help me make decisions that were based on evidence and science and not on fear. I feel like when it comes to choosing between a repeat C-section and a VBAC, a lot of people do come from this place of fear or hearing other people's experiences, maybe traumatic ones. And I wanted to make sure that I was not doing that. I wanted to really be focused on the statistics, the evidence, the science. And a doula, in addition to being an emotional support person, is a really great person to help you navigate those things. And they're like a neutral party. You know, like, yes, they're going to support you in what you want, but they're also really great at staying neutral and giving you the facts so that you can make the decision that's best for you.
I think, again, like you mentioned, just having the people on your team that, again, like you said, like align with what you envision and want, but also that they are equipped to handle those different scenarios that can come up. And, also having someone like a doula that can really give you that neutral evidence-based information so that you can make the best decision possible, regardless of what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
So dive in a little bit like with your plan for labor with the TOLAC.
Yes. So for the place that I was seeing for my care, their policy was that you scheduled a C-section no later than 41 weeks, which I was a little disappointed about because the evidence, the science, the research doesn't necessarily support that. But of course, I can't help what the hospital policy is. So basically, if I did not go into labor on my own before 41 weeks, I would have to schedule my C section. Now, my due date was on a Saturday. So 41 weeks would have also been on a Saturday. They don't schedule C sections for Saturdays. So I believe my C section was scheduled for a Thursday. So it wasn't even quite 41 weeks. It was like 40 and 5 days, I want to say, which still gave me time, but I felt a little pressure because I was like, I gotta get this baby to come out before 40 and 5. And I actually had had an experience with an OB at the practice towards the end of my pregnancy who was basically like, you should schedule the C section at 40 weeks. You know, just was giving me the vibes that they were not supportive. And most of the time I saw a midwife because I was still like low risk, but I did have to see OBs occasionally to educate me on the risks and, all the things. And I was just like, I will not be doing that. I will schedule it the last possible day. So, anyways, I went in for an appointment at, I think I was 39 weeks, 5 days. And the midwife did say, we can try for a membrane sweep because you have about a week until your C section. Let's see if we can get things going. My cervix was not dilated, so she literally couldn't do it. Um, so, the plan was just to go home, keep relaxing, doing all the things. Like I was eating the dates, I was drinking the red raspberry leaf tea, I was spending a lot of time on my birth ball, I was curb walking, doing the miles circuit, like we talked about in the previous episode in Caitlin's birth story. I also structured my workouts throughout my entire pregnancy to be supportive for a TOLAC and a vaginal birth. So early on in my pregnancy, I was like, I need to prepare for a vaginal birth because that's what I want. And I didn't go into labor with my first. So I didn't know what it felt like to be in labor. I was kind of going in blind experience wise. So I was like, I'm going to work on increasing my endurance, my stamina, really working on lower body strength, working on shoulder strength. So that way I had options when I was in labor and I wasn't, limited in the ways that my body could move or the positions I could labor in. So I was really mindful of that and also working on lots of mobility. So I was mindful of this my entire pregnancy. And so then, really at the end, focusing on those hip openers, opening the different levels of the pelvis. I also talked about this in the last episode. So that was kind of my like at home plan to try to see if I could speed things up. And then the plan with my care team in terms of the TOLAC was I needed to call the midwife when my water broke because they needed to be aware that I was in labor because they had to make sure there was an OB on call. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's always an OB on call, but they wanted to make sure of that and make sure that they had an OR prepped and ready just in case something happened. So they had to be alerted that I was in labor. And then they also just didn't want me to labor too long at home on my own, just again because of the rupture risk. So basically, the plan was just like let us know when things start happening and we can talk through what the next steps are.
And I think, again, just like you talked about how you prepared your body, which is so helpful. I think, I know you talk about like empowering people to do this a lot, but I think like as you're talking through your birth story, like it's just like very evident with like how intentional like you want it to be to support your goal, which I think is just like is really cool. Um, when did you go into labor and did that happen like on your own, on its own?
Yes. So it was not in my plan to be induced. That can be a little tricky with a VBAC. So they had told me, like, we could potentially do this, but it has risks, So I was like, I think I had come to the conclusion where I was like, I don't think I want to be induced. If I get to 40 weeks, 5 days, and I haven't gone into labor, it's okay. I did my best. I tried. I did what I could do, but like, we're just having a C-section. But a few days leading up to my due date, I was getting some like mild period cramps, nothing really happening. I remember texting my doula being like, I think I have period cramps. Like, it's not contractions. Like, I think I had some Braxton Hicks too, but I was just like, how will I know when things are happening? And she was like, you'll know. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't know what I'm looking for here. So on my due date came and went. I was like, cool, cool. That day, though, I did a lot of workouts. I did a workout with a lot of squats and hip mobility. I'm like, we are opening this pelvis, baby. You're getting down in there. Let's go. And I did feel like she was low in my pelvis. We went on a walk that day, I remember, and I was like, she is so low. How is she not like falling out right now? That night, my husband and I were playing cards, trying to keep my mind busy. And I remember I went to the bathroom and I suspected I lost part of my mucus plug, but again, I had no idea. Texted my doula. I'm like, I might have lost my mucus plug or part of it. And she was like, great, keep me posted. Like, my ringer's on all night. And I was like, okay, hopefully you hear from me. I remember I took a picture of my belly in the mirror before I went to bed because I looked in the mirror and I was like, holy shit, like, my belly is so low right now. Like, she is ready. And that night at 1:52 a.m., I looked back in my notes app on my phone. I still have my notes app, like in my notes, I still have it written when my first contraction started and when I was timing
That's
it.
so funny.
I know, I'm going to leave it in there forever. But yeah, it was 1:52, woke up to my first contraction. And I remember my first thought was like, I know. My doula said I would
Yeah.
know. I know. This is no doubt about it. It was a contraction. And so I was just like laying there. I would kind of fall asleep in between a little bit. So I was trying to just like track them. They were about 10 minutes apart consistently for 2 hours. So I was like, okay, this seems like maybe something's happening here. I did get to the point where I had to like get up and go down to the couch because I felt like I was starting to have to move through the contractions and my husband was sleeping and I was like, I don't feel like I need to wake him up right now, like nothing major's happening. So I was like, I'm just going to go downstairs so I can be on the couch, move if I need to. And at 3:44, again, it's in my notes. So about 2 hours later, my water broke. And I remember I was coming down the stairs. I think I'd come back up to like get a pillow or something. I was walking down my stairs and I legitimately felt like a pop. And I was like, what was that? And then I like felt this big contraction coming, like that wave, of the
Mm.
contraction. And it was a gush. It was just like the movies, like just gushed everywhere. And I was like, okay, this is happening. And then the next contraction that came after that was like way more intense than anything else I'd been feeling. And I was like, shit. Okay. So, and then I'm downstairs, of course, right? He's up here like dead asleep. And I'm like, now I got to get my ass up there. Wake him up. I'm like crawling up the stairs, like through my contractions. And he's just like, again, dead asleep. I'm like, you gotta get up. I'm in labor. And he's like, what? Like, must be nice. Finally woke him up. They're like getting closer together, like 7 minutes or so. So I called my doula, explained to her what was happening, and she was like, okay, yep, like I'm awake, keep me posted, call the midwife, let them know. So I called into the hospital. And she said, again, because they weren't like 5 minutes or less. So she was like, you can keep laboring for now. Like, we'll make sure everything is here and ready. Feel free to take a shower, feel free to nap. And I was like, yeah, that's not happening anymore. We're past that.
I don't know
So
why they say that too. Like when I initially called, they're like, "Yeah, you can like go back to sleep if you want to try." And I was like, "I'm not sleeping right now." Like, you
I know
know.
when people talk about sleeping through their labor, I'm like, what? We did not have the same experience because there was no sleeping.
No.
But anyways, so then I called my sister, told her to come out, like, wanted her to wake up, have some time to wake up, get over to watch my son. And I remember being on all fours, like on the floor. That was how I felt most comfortable in my contractions. Going back to my workouts in pregnancy, like this was what I planned for because I knew I was like, a lot of people like to labor on all fours and move through contractions. You need strong shoulders to do that, to hold your
Yeah.
body up. So in that moment, I was so thankful that I did like all that shoulder work, all that all fours work in pregnancy because that was my like main position for most of my
Mhm.
labor. I did throw up when we were at home from like the intensity of one of the contractions, but I like knew I wasn't in like transition yet. So I was just like, oh, I'm going to be in for it here. I'm already throwing up. And we ended up heading to the hospital around 5 a.m. So this was like 3
Okay.
hours after labor started.
Okay. So yeah, you had about like 3 or so hours sort of in that like early like labor period. Um, what did you feel like was there any other signals outside of like your contractions getting closer together that made you guys be like, okay, like we need to like go now? And then like what kind of happened once you did get to the hospital?
Yeah, I mean, they were getting closer together. And I think too, like, I was just a little nervous. Again, just knowing that I had the risk of a uterine rupture, I was just like, I just don't want to be in a position where I'm dealing with that by myself because it
Yeah.
can be life-threatening. So I was like, I would feel calmer and I would feel more at ease just already being at the hospital, knowing that if something goes wrong, I have people here to take care of it. Like you, the drive, terrible.
Oh,
I feel like I was like blacked out or something because I think being in the car too, like you have no space to move. You're going over bumps. For some reason, you feel every single bump in that car when you're in labor, and it's just like terrible. So we arrived to triage at 5:30. They checked me. I was 4 centimeters, 90% effaced, which I was like, great. -3 station, though. That girl was high in my pelvis, which shocked me because I was like, she feels so low. Like, I had, even when we were in the car, at times felt the need to push. So I was like, I thought she was way lower than that.
mm,
Got into my labor and delivery room around 6:15. So my doula met me there. Spent a lot of time sitting on the birth ball laboring. So I had the ball next to my bed. I was sitting on that, kind of like rocking back and forth, trying to move that mid pelvis, make space there. And then I would like lean over on the bed quite a bit. She was providing a lot of counter pressure for me, which was amazing. Highly
yeah.
recommend.
Absolutely. That's like the best. I found that helpful with both my pregnancies.
Yeah, so helpful. Um, and even just helping me breathe, like reminding me to have like more of the low moaning sounds, like just to really help relax. It was hard for me to not like get tense and tight. So I do feel like having the doula there to remind me to just like put her hands on my body, help me relax was really powerful. And the contractions did start to ramp up. I started to feel like I was like disassociating from my body. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but it almost felt like I was just like separate, like watching this
Mm,
happen. And I just felt like so disconnected because the pain was just getting so intense for me. And I was like, I'm not liking this. Like, this feels too like disjointed. My plan was to have an unmedicated birth, but at that point in time, I was like, I would really like an epidural, not because I'm trying to like, escape the pain or I feel like I can't handle it, but because I was like, I want to be more present in this moment. I want to be able to experience what is happening right now. And so I would like the epidural to just like take the edge off. So I like talked that through with my doula because she knew that my plan was unmedicated. And so we were like, okay, yes, let's do the epidural. I feel good about this. This is not something I'm going to regret. Like, let's move forward with this. They did not check me to see how far along I was. They were just like, you want the epidural? You can sit still long enough to place it. We're good to go. So they called the anesthesiologist. He came right in, placed that epidural. Took about like 30 minutes or so for it to kind of, work its way through. I did feel like immediate relief. And in that moment, I was just like, yep, this was the right choice for me. Like, I feel good about this. I was able to relax, like, close my eyes. I was really fortunate that contractions were still happening. They did start to space out a little bit, but not to the point where I needed Pitocin or anything. Um, my baby's heart rate was great. She was not in distress, so that was great. Oh, I did have to have continuous monitoring. I forgot to add that part. So because of the VBAC, I did have to have continuous monitoring, which meant I could not use the tub, which was a big bummer. I was hoping to be able to use that, but that just wasn't an option with their policy, so I just went with that. Um, but yeah, I just felt like the epidural diffused the situation. It was not so much that I couldn't feel anything. I could still feel my limbs. I could move my legs. I could move around in the bed. I obviously couldn't like stand up and put weight on my legs, but I could move enough and I could still feel the urge to push and stuff like that. We did use a peanut ball to put in between my legs so that I could still get that movement in my hips. So I was laying on my side. And then it was around like 9:15. I was really strongly feeling the urge to push where I was like, I can't stop this. So my doula got the midwife and she checked me. I was 10 centimeters. Baby was +3. So we were like ready to go. She's like, if you're ready to push, let's do it. I pushed for about an hour total. I did try a couple of different positions. And ultimately, surprisingly to me, I felt most comfortable pushing on my back. And this was something that I was pretty adamant about that I did not want to push on my back. I feel like on social media these days, pushing on your back is very like, this is the worst possible thing that you could ever do. And it's not. But we want to be intentional about how we're doing it. So, something that we did was we rolled up a towel and had a towel roll on one side of my hip. So, this allowed space for my sacrum and my tailbone to move, which that can be the problem with birthing on your back is just like restricting movement in the pelvis, specifically that tailbone area. So, this allowed some more space. They were also able to drop out part of the bed again to give me some space. And I made sure I had my knees in and my ankles out to open the pelvic outlet, the bottom of my pelvis, to make the most space for baby. I did have a hard time getting the pushes right, like trying to figure out like how to effectively push, which again surprised me a little bit that it was like hard for me to kind of coordinate that. And I do wonder if that was also just because of the epidural, just like
Sure.
disrupting that connection to my muscles a little bit. But once I did get it, things moved pretty quickly. And I did have my midwife use a warm compress on my perineum to help reduce tearing. And when I was crowning, she actually had me slow down with the pushing just to allow time for those tissues to like expand and relax. And that was really helpful. But yeah, baby was born about an hour after pushing. And they said, they treated me like a first time mom, again, since I didn't go into labor or anything with my first. And so they were like pretty impressed with how quick everything went, given that, yeah, I was basically like a first time mom. And they
Yeah.
were like, if you have another baby, you better get in here quick because it's going to go quick next time. I was like, don't worry, you won't be seeing me again. But literally, when she was placed on me, like after she came out, she was placed on me. I was just like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, it was just the
Yeah.
most empowering experience for me. I remember just being like, holy shit, like, I did it. We did it. Like, I was just like immediate crying because I was like,
Yeah.
this was what I wanted and it happened. And I know like a lot of people don't get that moment. So I just felt, so fortunate that like everything went in my favor and things worked out. And um, it was probably, yeah, just like the coolest moment of my life to be like, we did it.
I know. I was so happy, for you that you did get to have that experience because it was so just like important to you and you put in all of the like work to be so intentional to like improve your success at it. And so good to hear that like that happened. I know afterward you did have some like birth complications and we want to talk about that so people again have like the full picture and understanding. So can you walk us through a little bit about like what happened after you gave birth?
Yeah, so to be honest, I don't like fully know what happened, but I just know that like the placenta wasn't coming out. Like it wasn't happening the way it was supposed to. And so I do remember my midwife like literally reaching in and like detaching the placenta.
Mm,
Again, I don't really know why. I don't, like you said in the last episode, like the whole like birthing of the placenta, like I don't even remember like
yeah.
trying to do that. I think I was just so distracted with like having the baby on my chest and like just, enjoying that moment that I just didn't really know what was going on. But I do know she did have to remove the placenta, but I also had the epidural still, so it's not like I felt it. It wasn't like uncomfortable or painful or anything, and it was taken care of pretty quickly. I was able to go to the bathroom, like we went to the postpartum room, got all settled in, and it was like 3 or 4 hours later. My daughter was sleeping in her bassinet. My husband had gone out to get us food at Jersey Mike's because I was starving. They had a hospital lactation consultant that like did rounds there, so she came in to talk to me. And I just remember like she was sitting at the little table, I was in the bed, like talking to her, and all of a sudden I just felt like not like dripping, but almost just like a constant trickle. And I
Mm,
was like, I don't know that I should be bleeding like this. And then it almost felt like some small like gushes. And I was like, I think something's wrong.
yeah.
And she had left, and then my nurse came back in, and so I asked her to check me. I was like, I think I'm bleeding a lot, and I was still kind of uh like numb too from the
Right.
epidural, like still in one leg. I still like couldn't quite walk to the bathroom. Like when they had taken me to the bathroom when I was still in labor and delivery, they had me like sit on this weird thing and like pushed me in and like
Mm,
like I wasn't standing on my own yet. And so she checked me and she was like, "Yeah, I need to call the OB." And I was like, "Okay." And then so like my husband comes back with the Jersey Mike's. I'm like, "You might want to wait on eating that. I don't know that we're gonna be eating that right now. Something's happening." And he was like, "What do you mean?" And like the OB comes in, she checks me and she's like, "Okay, yep, you're bleeding too much." She like calls for backup. Like 10 people come swarming into the room. And I'm like, "What's happening?" I don't know if you experience this too, but
yeah.
it's like at first, like they're just focused on making sure like you're okay. They're not like explaining to you what's happening.
Hmm.
And so it was like pretty startling. Like my bed goes back, I'm laying flat again, and I'm like, what
Yeah.
the hell is going on? Like scary. It just like
Hmm.
happens so fast, and people are swarming and they're yelling out medical terms, and you're like, oh my gosh. I was so thankful though. There was one, I think she was like a tech, but she came right by my head, was so calming, explaining to me what was happening, that I was having a postpartum hemorrhage, but they were going to take care of me. Everything was going to be okay. And I was just so thankful having her standing there, just like being this calming presence. Like, because I mean, my husband was there too, but he was also freaking out, So to
Yeah.
have her just like explaining what was happening, it took them a while to kind of get everything under control. They had this like vacuum thing that they had
Mm,
to like put in and like clamp into my uterus to kind of get everything. They had explained it to me. It was something like new, but it's like highly effective to just kind of
okay.
help, yeah, with all of that. And so I did have to have a catheter put in because I had to stay in the bed. I want to say it was like 12 hours or something.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Um, but my daughter's like sleeping the entire time. She has no idea what's happening.
I know.
She's just like chilling. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were able to get it all under control very quickly, but we did have to stay an extra night in the hospital just so they could check, make sure everything was okay. And yeah, once that all got taken out, I was able to go to the bathroom. I was able to shower and like I didn't feel any like effects from it. My bleeding had returned to like normal postpartum bleeding. So, I mean, that was great. Like everything seemed to be resolved fairly quickly, but it was definitely scary.
Yeah, I feel like my experience was very similar, especially that beginning sort of piece that you were describing in terms of like, oh, like this feels like a lot of blood. Like I had passed like a grapefruit sized clot like initially, so it was like really big. And then that like subsequent bleeding happened afterwards. But yeah, it was that same sort of like, rush of other people and everything to like check. And then I didn't have an epidural. So it was like, now they're going back up in right after you've like had a baby. And I luckily had some like nitrous oxide to like help with the pain. Because at that point, I was just like, so, you're uncomfortable and like it is just like really scary.
Yeah, it is. And it's like you're already I feel like you're already starting to like experience that like hormone like drop. And so then you're just like
Yeah, you're just like
emotional
crashing.
and yeah, it's so
Yeah,
hard.
yeah. Um, so again, like I'm so sorry that you had to experience that part too, because it is just so traumatic, I think, and it does again, like it impacts your whole, experience as you start to go into like postpartum and like your motherhood journey, like with your new baby. Um, but like again, as we're like wrapping this up, like can you give any of our listeners who are trying to decide between like doing a TOLAC, VBAC, or repeat C-section, like what are resources or things that you would recommend that they consider if they are looking to do this?
Yeah, so I think something that's important to mention is like there is not a right or a wrong choice. You know, like it's really going to depend on the person, on their circumstances, also on your previous birth experience. I think that has a big impact on what you choose to do moving forward. Like I have friends that chose to do a repeat C-section just because their first labor was so hard and it just felt traumatic to end in a C-section. And they were like, sure, I could try for a VBAC. I'm a good candidate. But emotionally, I just don't want to do that. I would rather go in knowing exactly what to expect and not deal with the rest. And that's perfectly fine. And I just don't want you to feel, shame or guilt for choosing one over the other. There's no right answer. However, if you do want to try for a VBAC, I do recommend checking out VBAC Facts. I will put a link in the show notes. She's a fantastic resource, just giving all of the research, statistics, all the information that you need to make a well informed decision. I would also check out Evidence Based Birth. They have great resources as well.
Yeah, they're
And
wonderful.
yeah, highly recommend. And I would also find a provider who's supportive of TOLAC VBACs and has the resources to support that, kind of like what I mentioned at the beginning. I would recommend hiring a doula. Again, it's just really helpful to have someone else there, someone that is, quote unquote, on your side, but also can be neutral and just help you navigate these tougher decisions. Preparing your body physically is a big one. Remembering that labor is an athletic event, it is
Yes.
challenging. And the more that you can prepare, the better off you're going to be, no matter how your birth goes. And then I would say the mental prep as well. I mean, I think both those things are important for any kind of birth, even your first birth. But I think, especially for a VBAC, the mental prep is big too. And just going into it too, knowing that like you can't control the outcome and kind of being okay with that, on the onset, like knowing like I could do everything right. and I could still end up in a C-section. And that does not mean that I'm a failure. That does not mean that there's something wrong with me. It doesn't mean my body's broken. Like, birth is unpredictable. We do the best we can, but in the end, we really don't have control over how it goes.
Yeah, I think like thank you so much for sharing all of those pieces and your experience with your birth story today. I think again, just like being able to have people share these kinds of experiences with other moms or moms to be, so it helps like empower them and inform the decision about the, again, preferences that maybe they would like, even it, and just like knowing the possibilities regardless of the outcome. And so, like, if you want to connect with Meg further about her VBAC experience, you can reach out to her. She's a wealth of knowledge. Send her an Instagram DM. Her handle is Vibrant Mama Wellness. And we will be back next week.